Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rovertime podcast, episode number 20. Big things happened this week, but particularly what I want to talk about, at least at first.
Yeah, dude.
Oh, fine. All right. Here are my peons. No, I'm just kidding. We got Dr. Manhattan today.
Hey.
We got Minding Freedom.
Hey there.
Yeah.
To be honest,
Phil.
saying peons for those first two is correct.
Actually. That's my name now.
Phil, I'll introduce you as Sirius, I guess. Or we call him Duffer, and then Stan, and myself.
Yo.
Howdy. The thing I want to start off talking about, though, first is pretty obvious, is the Trump's UN speech. And
I think it's Ryan.
Oh,
Hey.
we got another peon.
Suddenly, a random lesbian appeared.
All right, yeah, so Trump's UN speech I want to talk about. So I think it was a great speech overall. I mean, and the funniest thing that I've heard all month was Donald Trump calling Kim Jong-un Rocket Man. So I wanted to start off with this
With
speech.
some Elton John lyrics, right? Burning out the shoes and here alone.
Elton John.
It's
That's what.
It's quality image right there.
That's
Yep.
great.
It's going to be our thumbnail.
That has to be the thumbnail.
But yeah, I mean, everything.
Do you not use the Discord
talk about-
client?
What?
On a completely unrelated tangent, I saw you had a Discord tab open. Do you not use the client?
The what?
You can
Oh, I could
download
add a separate-
Discord to your computer.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll figure it out later.
Hey guys. What's up?
So, what are
What
people's
up,
take
Ryan?
on this speech? Like, I'm actually really interested to
I
hear.
loved it.
Well, I want to know what to talk about first, because I want to get to the Rocket Man one later. But I mean, with both the
Pack
UN
bags.
speech and his rally for that guy he's trying to get elected, to those of them together, it seems like Trump is bringing back all the talking points that he had that got him elected. Just like not speaking like. Well, he was actually very. Other than the Rocket Man, I thought it was very professional. The speech was very, very good. But he was talking once again about nationalism, putting one's own country first, not just for us, but for every other country. They should put their country first. And he really, gave it to the UN, trying
As
to
you should, because the UN sucks.
Frickin' he just dumped all over North Korea and Iran. It was great. He was
Good.
just sitting there like looking
Well,
at
the
him,
other-
just like, look how bad
And
these
the
people are.
The other part that I think that he also spoke about that kind of seems to, of course, with Rocket Man was essentially calling out and saying what a bunch of shit socialism is.
Oh yeah, he did.
Yeah,
That was
Yep.
great.
There's never a bad time to stick it to socialism.
It's never bad.
Yeah, because I believe he said, it's not that they, that they didn't do it right.
It's that,
It's that they
they're
did it
faithfully
exactly
implementing
right.
it.
They
Yes, that was his
faithfully,
quote.
they faithfully, followed it, and it's like, okay, thank you.
And he
That's what
paused.
everyone has been saying
Yeah.
all the, and it's, they were all like, oh, this is uncomfortable because they're not used to, being called out on the carpet. They're used to the last,
And then it was great during his
last 8 years
Iran
of cuck and.
his Iran tirade, and Netanyahu's over there just beaming.
Well, I think one of the things that Trump managed to do was
Good
to
job,
illustrate
man.
just
Great.
how tacitly the UN is on board with the globalist agenda kind of thing. They silently want the world to plod along and everybody to basically get their governments in order so that the UN can run things indirectly and not have to deal with any yelling or anyone calling them out and basically being like, it's not okay to let rogue states remain rogue. It's not okay on a political spectrum, on the political level. It's not okay from a citizenship level. And the fact that we allow states like North Korea to get a disproportionate amount of play on the international sort of stage just because they saber rattle is silly. And for an American president to come out and say that, that's actually important to be like, look, you're a small nation. You are doing things which we don't like, and you need to smarten up because the international community, even though it might be pushovers at present, needs to wake up and actually do something about states that are going rogue.
It kind of reminds me of that one thing. like that Captain America quote, you know, the whole like, hey, if someone tells you to move, like North Korea, it's like, no, you move. That's kind of what I get from that whole, just Trump saying fuck off to Korea.
You know, North Korea has also been allowed to just essentially just, I mean, status quo almost for the last how many presidents, you know, and it's, you know, and it's just, you know, the consistent has been, well, they'll do, you know, they'll this, they'll that, and.
Did anybody else here see the bit that Steven Crowder did where he was imitating the presidents, and as soon as, like, they were just all kowtowing to Kim, and as soon as they got to Donald Trump, he was just like, frankly, lose this number. And then they were like, oh, we fucked up. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably how he's feeling right about now, I imagine. Please tell me that.
Yeah, but you know, the thing is, he is now forced to maintain a backbone with the North Korea issue because you can't elevate speech further than we will totally destroy North Korea if we have to, unless you say we will totally destroy North Korea twice over. I mean, you're not going to ramp it up from that.
I think he has so far. I mean, with the sanctions he just did, refusing to do business with any country that also does business with North Korea, that's awesome. And so far it's worked too. Like China has frozen like something like 70% of North Korea's accounts that they have already.
And that's the point I was just about to make. It's like after his UN speech, China, it's like, oh shit, okay. The president is actually backing up what he's saying.
Yeah.
He actually means it. We better take this seriously. And it's like, you know, they're getting hit. Of course, I did love the North Korean prime minister or whatever, UN representative. Didn't he call him President Evil? He called Trump President. I think he said, as many people call him President Evil and saying all of these things. It's like, oh my God, it's gold. I found it.
Kettle.
The left can't meme.
The left really
they can't.
Meme.
Well, in this case, literally it can't meme, because if he tried to meme, he'd probably disappear and be in some sort of work camp by the end of the week.
Yeah, probably. But I just wanted to say one thing. Kim Jong-un's letter to Donald Trump is a little bit more sane than Donald Trump. Maybe we trade.
It was Chelsea Handler that said that. Right?
Yeah, exactly. How can you? How?
Because
well, that's hyperbolic, of course. But the thing which is so funny about that is she probably believes it.
Yeah,
but how can you? You want to trade a democratically elected president of a democratic country
as opposed to someone who thinks that they are a demigod
for a fucking socialist mass murderer.
Speaking of socialist mass murderers, can we talk about Merkel?
God! In her defense, though, it is called the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea.
Yeah. Eastern Germany was called the German Democratic Republic. There were about 500 people killed trying to flee to West Germany.
New rule for anybody watching: if you have to put somewhere in your country's name you're democratic, you're fucking lying.
Exactly.
The Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Look at every country that actually has the word democratic in its name, or had in the past. None of them, 0%, were democratic.
No king is truly such if they call themselves that. God.
But you know what, though? Before we get off this topic, the one part that people criticize Trump for not being professional on when he called him Rocket Man, that's the thing that makes him a media genius, because now everyone is talking about North Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone is talking about Rocket Man.
Yeah, and when you watch the speech, he brings up things about North Korea that people may not know, such as how they kidnapped a Japanese girl and turned her into a language tutor for their spies. Like,
I think it's further proof that, and this was the same way during the campaign, is he's a marketing genius. It's like, look, this is a guy who got, what was it, like, how many billions of dollars of free airtime because he said the occasional incendiary thing during the campaign?
Oh yeah.
It's like
he knows how to play into people being dumb shits, basically.
And he still does it on Twitter every day.
Oh, yeah.
He just says something and then lets the media just chase their tails while he actually gets work done.
Kofifi, anybody?
Well, the sad thing, though, is it just illustrates how much of what the globalist sort of agenda or people with globalist intent try and rule through silence. If we don't acknowledge something, eventually it'll fade away. And in some ways, they're probably right. But at the same time, it's like, how much are you willing to give up? How much are you willing to allow people to suffer and just disappear within the machines of globalization before you actually act? And that's what's so terrifying about what they do with North Korea and with other nations like that, where it's like, so you're just okay with the fact that they do these things to their own citizens. It's like, well, yeah, because eventually we'll have one government and then everything will be okay. And it's like, well, I'm not sure if I buy into that.
Yeah, speaking of globalism, I saw a bit of an interview on CNN where someone was talking about the UN speech, and they brought up how Trump kept bringing up sovereignty, and they were bashing the concept of sovereignty.
Oh.
I mean, it's blatant. They're like, this is supposed to be a time where we're all coming together. And
no, fuck you. I want to be American. That's all.
You sound like John McCain, and nobody likes him.
Yeah. So I forget who the people were and what segment that was on because I don't watch CNN, but I saw that clip and they were just bashing the idea of sovereignty, which gives you a clear idea of where they're headed.
Is it bad that I think it's hilarious how butthurt John McCain is?
Well, I don't think he's butthurt. What John McCain is doing is I think he's trying to cement his legacy because he knows this is his last term. And yeah, I mean, he's always been kind of the maverick. Like he's leaving his mark on things. That's all he's trying to do. He's trying to get his place in the history books. He doesn't give a crap if it's the right or wrong thing to do.
He just wants to be there at some point. Right. He's like, legacy, bitch.
Exactly.
I
respect him for his sacrifices he made for this country. I have contempt for him for what he's doing now.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Well, in terms of legacy, though, for politicians and senators and whatnot, it's increasingly hard to actually leave a legacy just because things turn over so quickly and the political tide shifts so quickly. So it's like if we look back historically, you'll actually probably find more notable politicians where you can be like, oh, that person, we know them for this. Whereas you jump forward 20 years and you're like, who's this person? They've been elected to this position 4 times and we haven't heard anything about them.
Yeah,
so
right.
It's tough to do.
Speaking of 4 times, hey, Minding, I'm sorry your country's going to fucking burn. Yeah.
It's that time of the day. Go ahead,
Teach us about Germany, Minding.
All right. Your culture that won't be here in 2
decades. Guys, shut up.
Tell us about how terrible the Bundestag is first and how terrible of a system it is.
How wunderbar is everything over there?
Oh, man. All right. So, as you might have heard, we had a federal election. The Bundestag our parliament was completely up for re-election, and yeah, it didn't really go well. I'm just gonna try to do something here. Hopefully that works.
Now, Minding, were you expecting it to go differently?
Wait a second. Does that work? Can you see that window?
I can't see anything yet.
Nothing different.
Really?
Nah.
That's shit.
It's just black screen. Yeah.
It does say you're sharing, but we're not getting anything.
Yeah, weird. Is something not connected or some shit?
That's shit. Okay.
There's an arrow by your name for me. I don't know what that means.
Send it to Mark.
Yeah.
Mark.
I don't think that works. Because I can only access it from Germany, so that falls flat. But okay, I'm just gonna read it.
Sounds good.
So those are so far the projections of the election results. I gotta say though, they're pretty accurate, and maybe something happens that one party or another has 0.2% more or less in the final result. But this is pretty much it. So Merkel's CDU and the Bavarian sister party CSU have 32.8% of the vote. The SPD, which is the party that governed together with Merkel in the last 4 years, is at 20.4%. The AfD, third strongest party, at 13%. the classical liberal FDP 10.7%, the socialist the left 9.1%, and the Greens 9%.
Those damn Greens, they couldn't stay in their own aisle.
Actually, minding, isn't that like within 2 points of the last election? There's not much change there.
Oh, well, no. There's a lot of change.
Okay.
There's a lot of change. So what happened compared to 2013 is the CDU and the SPD lost a lot. CDU lost. They were at 41.5% in 2013.
They're combining the CDU and CSU, right?
Yeah, in Germany we always say the CDU. Like we know that there is this Bavarian sister party that they split up for some fucked up reason, but we just say CDU. We mean both, because they're basically not separable. They had 41.5%. They dropped over 8%, almost 9%. The SPD dropped over 5%, or percentage points, I must say. The AFD from 4.7 to 13, which is pretty much 8.3, yeah, 8.3
percentage increase.
Pretty much, yeah. The FDP from 4.8 to 10.7, that's almost 6 percentage points, so more than 100% increase. And the Greens and the left, yeah, they both got about 0.5% more. Doesn't really matter. Those are the ones who went away from the SPD and were like, nah, we want real leftist politics. Yeah, because that's such a good idea.
Yeah, leftism for when you really want shit to get done.
Yeah.
So Merkel's going to end up with a coalition government again. Is there going to be any change in any particular policies?
I heard the projection was that she was actually going to form a coalition with the Greens, or try to.
Well, she I think like her, if you can say that, her wet dream. I don't want to think about that too.
No, God.
But her dream for the her political dream, let's say, for the last, I don't know, few years, maybe for her whole life, was to form a coalition government with the Greens, so the CDU and the Greens. The result doesn't enable that. The Greens and the CDU were too bad together to form a coalition. They don't have a majority. So basically, in the media, we have talks about two coalition governments right now. One would be same old, CDU and SPD, the as we call it, the Grand Coalition, because it's the two biggest parties in Germany. The other option would be a so-called Jamaica coalition because of the colors in the Jamaican flag, which is CDU, the black, FDP, the yellow, and the Greens, obviously the green. But
really, obviously green.
I mean,
hot.
The FDP is a classical liberal party. The Greens pretty much want to prohibit everything that makes fun.
Oh, so they're a nanny state. Great.
Yeah, they are. But they're leftists. What do you expect? They're environmentalist leftists.
How, by the way, I want to bring this up publicly, I guess. How on earth is it that the Greens control Stuttgart? It's like the freaking world home of the automobile.
What do they control?
Stuttgart.
Oh yeah. I didn't understand that the first time. Yeah. They were clever for once. Remember in 2011 there was this, let's call it a problem, in all the way to the east in Japan, Fukushima, if you remember. The tsunami and the nuclear power plant and everything. the Greens and the media in Germany, they together, they use it perfectly for their advantage. The Greens polled at around 20% at the time. And in 2011, there were state elections in Baden-Württemberg, which is the state surrounding Stuttgart. And they were so strong because they played it perfectly. I gotta admit, they played it well. That they became the strongest party in that state, and they got the government, or the position of governor, if you want to call it that. It's called prime minister for German states, but it's pretty much what a governor does.
Now, Minding, quick question with that. Is what you're articulating here the sort of the oddness of German guilt? So it seems that a lot of German voting is based off of, we don't want to be associated with something bad that happened in the past, ergo we're going to vote for completely the opposite thing. So in this case, it's like, okay, Fukushima happened in Japan. Oh my gosh, nuclear power is terrible. We have to make sure that nuclear power problems never happen. Let's vote for a party that will make sure it doesn't happen. In the same way, it's like the right is terrible in any way, shape, or form from the German perspective. So we need to make sure we vote for entirely leftist parties. It seems to be a bit of a weird nationalist complex in terms of how Germans vote.
I'm not a fan of the notion that there is, like, in every German, or in most Germans, the sense of German guilt. Maybe I'm too, let's say, too German myself to see it, but I don't think so.
Wait, Minding, you're German?
Dude, shut up.
Buddy.
Maybe it's that I don't see it, but I don't think that it is as prevalent as you make it out to be. It is there, definitely. I don't deny that. It is there for some. But I think it's just that German people are easy to manipulate, easier than other people or peoples. And I think that's a problem. And we have this, let's say we have this tendency of, why the fuck you laughing?
Look at the Discord.
Oh God! Come on,
Mark, present it. Show it.
Oh
no! Don't show that. Don't show that.
Do it.
Oh man.
okay, but
Where was I? Damn it!
So you're saying that it's not German guilt? It's something else.
It's something else. It's that Germans are easy to manipulate, and that they have this tendency of, let me call it corporatist tendency, that they're thinking that, you know, some regulation might be okay, and you know, freedom, yeah, maybe complete freedom not so good, you know, all of that.
Maybe basic human rights are not that great an idea.
Well, actually, no, it's the opposite. They think that you need to protect them to such a degree that you can't let anybody adjust them in any way, shape, or form. Germany's stance on human rights and on, you know, socialist policies to help people in terms of Medicare and stuff like that are far, far, far to the left of what Americans would think of as intolerable. So they're even further to the left of Canada in terms of what the government is supposed to do. It is a nanny state.
Exactly.
So, Duffer, maybe we can get your input on this as well. I've heard it postulated that Germany is a very romantic country versus an enlightened country. So that there tends to be, throughout history, a much more emotional basis to matters than logic. They didn't really share the Enlightenment. They kind of went a different way with Romanticism, and that's always what's guided them.
Well, that's an interesting point to take there, Phil. Just because when we think of the stereotypical German attributes, it's the mechanicalness of how they approach things. I would think that the issue is more that, as Minding was getting to, when the German people jump on board with something, they go full bore. And you can see that in the unification of Germany. You can see that in the world wars. And you can also see that in their response to the post-war era, where they basically utterly recant things. I'm not sure if it's necessarily romanticism, but rather, let's say, a sense that things will always be as they are. And you get caught in the inertia, so why not go along with it? I think that's kind of like, it could be similar to sort of the Russian perspective on things too. Things will be as they will be, so just let them be. And if they are the way they are now, they should be this way. Kind of
I'll
thing.
show you the article that brought that point up and see what you think about that.
Actually, I wanna get to that. This idea things are the way they are supposed to be, and just let them be. I think that's actually basically the opposite of what's going on in Germany. I think it's exact. Yeah, I don't think it's because that I gotta say I think that's basically my point of view, and I'm not part of the majority in Germany by no means.
Well, yeah, because you're a badger. I think the most Germans are actually people. I miss you, dude. Just give me this.
But so Philip, are you sort of saying that it's romanticism, but it's also fatalism? Is what you're saying it's a marriage of?
I'll show you the article that brought it up, and you tell me. It's been a while since I've read it. I'll dump it in there.
All right, cool.
But yeah, I'm pretty sure, Phil, that you're talking about the article you sent me.
Yeah, same one.
Yeah. Okay, so I know what you're talking about. And I had a bit more time now to think about this. I think that the author is right to some degree. Well, hard to say, but actually, the author is pretty much right because he never makes that point, but he makes it sound like it. That he thinks that romanticism is the root of all of this, and I don't think that romanticism is the root of all of this. Maybe of some, pretty much, definitely of some, but I think there is this. I don't know how to say that. I think the German people are the most extreme people in all of the West. Yeah, let's just put it that way.
Which is kind of a romantic ideal, really.
Yeah, but
they romanticize something and then want to go all in on it, essentially.
Yeah, but maybe it's inherent in German, I don't know, existence or something. I mean, the history of Germany is not like the history of the U.S. or England or Great Britain or the United Kingdom, which is the actual term, or France or some other country. Germany up until 1800 something. Was made up of like hundreds of small, tiny states, who all had their own governments, mostly monarchs, and sometime in the 19th century, a movement of unification began, which led to Germany being pretty much one country in, I think,
1870?
1871. 1870 was when they started the war with the French. 1871 was when we won it.
And this is the great irony that Canada is an older nation than Germany.
Say what again?
The great irony that Canada is actually an older nation than Germany.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, pretty much not every nation, but every nation in the West is an older nation than Germany. Germany is like in their baby shoes.
Modern Germany is only what, 30 years old.
Modern Germany, the way it is right now, is what do we have? 2017, 27 years old.
Wow, that's fucking weird, man.
If we're talking about let's say the laws of Germany and everything, those were drafted in the late 1940s, right after World War II. So we're talking 70 years, pretty much. 68 years since, let's say, the founding of today's Germany, the Federal Republic of Germany. 68 years. That's not much by historical standards.
Despite it not being particularly federal.
Yeah. It was the original idea. But we talked about it earlier with the democratic countries that are not actually democratic, but they got it in their name.
Oh,
Germany's got the federal.
Well, I mean, if they have democratic in their name, they must be.
Yeah, and Germany's got the federal in their name, so they must be federal. Yeah. But we do have some kind of federal structure. It's just that we have much more power on the national level, which I personally don't like, but that's the way it is. I would love to change it, but there's no real way to make that happen.
Tell all the people to vote better.
Yeah.
I tried. Look what happened this election. Merkel still basically got reelected.
God.
My power is limited.
But only you were not a badger.
So you're not like Emperor Palpatine then. You don't have unlimited power.
I'm not, no. I'm sorry. But I wanted to actually get back to the possible coalition governments. Because the SPD, this very night, pretty much like 10 minutes after the first projections came in, they said, we're not available for any government whatsoever. Which was... I mean, they're the second strongest party. And they're like, fuck this, we're out of here. So that pretty much leaves the CDU with one option. Trying to get the classical liberals and the leftist environmentalists on the same table for 4 years. Yeah, good luck with that.
So... Man, and leftism's everywhere.
It is. Yeah. It's omnipresent at the moment.
I mean, speaking of which, just recently, Roaming, since we're kind of derived from her group, she had that event at college, and I was there for some of it. And oh boy.
So smooth, Phil.
It's interesting. It was interesting witnessing the vitriol in person for the first time.
Phil, can you give us some backstory on the event? Like, what was it and why was she there?
Well, so it's a professor there, and he runs a series of events. It's Lafayette College in Pennsylvania. And the professor there runs a series of events called what he calls the Mill Series, where it's supposed to promote diversity of opinion and views on the campus. My understanding is most of the events, attendance it's pretty small. Like we're talking, 20 to 50 people. So anyway, they invited Roaming because I guess it's kind of the zeitgeist, which Mr. German over here can define for us.
Oh, come on.
Do it.
The spirit of the times?
Yeah.
German is supposed to define it, not you, Canadian. The zeitgeist is kind of just everybody's talking about SJW garbage at the school, and so the professor thought, well, let's try to invite someone who's got a reasonable following. And so they invited Romney, and she accepted. And it was supposed to be a sort of a Q&A conversation more than a speech.
Did she give a speech, though?
No. Other than just like a quick introduction, essentially. Although even that didn't really work out properly since, like, literally as soon as she had the microphone and said 2 words, about 30 people got up and walked out as some form of protest, even though I don't think it's particularly effective, being that it's an event open to the public. So,
yeah,
you know, a ticketed event, maybe that would have worked. But, a ticketed event, maybe that would have worked, but a public event, that's pretty stupid.
It's also just a small event. You're not changing anything by not attending it. It's just an event. It's
stupid.
It's just wasting your own time to protest like that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But that is an example of a purity test. So look at us. We're so great. We walked out on the right-wing, hateful person that is roaming Millennial.
I think the people that originally walked out, I think those were the ones that identified themselves as Antifa because they were all dressed in black.
Of course they were.
But there wasn't any sort of violence or anything like that, so that's good.
Goth culture has got to take that back. I swear.
Yeah, right. At the very least, the vampire kids, like in that South Park episode. Jesus. Nobody else here remembers that, or is it just me?
I do. That was an awesome episode.
Thank you, God. God knows what it's all about.
But with that there, Phil, so they were basically protesting a non-event, which was just a speaker who was offering a other opinion opposed to what was popular on campus.
Well,
and they couldn't even engage in proper discussion?
Something I did want to add is that this particular event in the series was the best attended by far. So like I said, previous attendance for these events had been like 20 to 50. Well, this was like, I would say somewhere around 160 to 170 before the people who obviously weren't interested in attending left. So, you know, somewhere around the just slightly under 150 area once those people had left.
Now, what was Roaming's comments? Were there any in particular that the audience didn't like?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Basically, other than everything. The two that caused particular reactions that I remember were, let's see, the first one, I'm trying to sort out the order in my brain here. So, the first one was she called English the official language of the U.S.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, yeah, if you want to be pedantic, it's not, but it's the de facto language, so
yeah,
it's definitely 100% intellectually honest to make that comment. But
and it's 100% racist, I gotta say.
Oh, but that got
by default the official language should be the language that the Constitution was written in.
Well, right, and it's all on it. Like she was pointing out, it's like it's the language used by every official government agency. You know, occasionally they'll have like Spanish translations, but that's by far the exception. So it's like, what the heck, you know? But anyway, so that got a particularly sour reaction. Just people like, no, it's not, and it's like, well, who cares? It's you're just being pedantic at this point. And then the second one was there was a question that immigration was a topic. So the whole event wound up lasting for, I guess, somewhere around 4 hours. I was only there for about an hour and a half of that, just because I was tired from driving and such to get there. So the entire section that I was there for was immigration, but it moved on to later subjects later, by my understanding. And so one of the questions was, I say question, but really what all the questions were was really just an outpouring of emotion by the students. Like, it was just, I disagree with you, and here's a bunch of emotion to prove that I do that.
Interesting. Or at least not interesting. That's actually something which I find very, very frustrating, is there is a wonderful art to a back and forth in a debate, and there's a really a great energy which you can develop out of, like, literally going after someone and being point and counterpoint. And this whole, I feel sad, ergo I must be right. I feel offended, ergo I am justified. It doesn't make for discourse. And I don't think that they're interested in discourse, but that's why they're so toxic to themselves.
Your interesting part of it is, it seemed to me at least that even the professor and so the professor is kind of a facilitator of the event, and then there was a student, a senior, that was kind of running it. I guess it was like a senior project sort of thing. But the professor and the student, they kind of seemed taken aback by just the level of vitriol that was being thrown out there. I mean, but anyway, so the second comment that got just people really, really riled up and caused some walkouts again was Roaming trying to defend. Oh, so I should say that the subject of the discussion was why I supported Trump, not why I think Trump is good and everything, just why I supported him. You know, her idea was just to try to explain why, in her words, why he has so much support in flyover country, essentially. And yeah, so the second comment, which got such a terrible reaction, was when she said that Trump doesn't hate immigrants. In fact, he's married to one.
Yes!
And it's like,
he said another factually accurate thing.
It was astonishing, the reaction. Like, I mean, it was just yelling, and I mean, people behind me were yelling like, she's white, like that has anything to do with anything.
Well, it's the problem of sins of omission versus sins of contrition. Like, I've been on a couple podcasts where people are like, Trump is racist, and it's like, okay, where can you actually pull that? Well, he doesn't care about these issues. So not caring is now the sin which you're going after. He hasn't done anything. You're saying by not actually having a horse in the race, he is ergo a racist. And it's like, how does that work? Does that mean that I'm a
people have called him anti-Semitic, and it's like, except, you know, his son-in-law and daughter are Orthodox Jews, and so are his grandchildren from that branch of the family tree. It's like, interesting.
It's insult salad. Like, what do you guys think of that? Because I literally think we're watching the devolution of language, because we go for the nuclear option first.
Dennis Prager talks about this all the time, and he actually coined this acronym years ago. It's called SIXERB, which is sexist, intolerant, xenophobic, homophobic, Islamophobic, racist, and bigoted. That's the words they use when there's nothing logically they can do to shut down your argument.
Just start throwing buzzwords, basically.
Exactly. They just insult you, because if they can label you a horrible thing, like any of those insults is, then you become unworthy of discussion, and therefore they don't need to worry about your arguments. That's his take on the matter, and I tend to agree.
Doc or Wazz, what's your thoughts on this?
I agree pretty much with what Phil just said. I was distracted by that size of that mug, though.
What?
You just drank out of it. That was distracted by that for a moment.
I have this every time I'm on here.
That's the first time I've seen it.
Same.
Every night, Steven Crowder is dreaming of having that mug.
Yeah,
it's a 52 ounce. It's just full of water.
Well, it takes a lot of container to hold all these.
I'm actually kind of disappointed, because Quick Trip, they used to have a 64 ounce one, but they downgraded to 52, and I would be using a 64 if they still had it available.
Nice.
And
now I understand why those Americans are always so fat.
It's fun. It's funny because this is like $5, and you can fill it with whatever the hell you want. Like if you just want a big, giant 52 ounces of Mountain Dew, go for it.
Truly, we are the greatest nation.
Now, would you guys be up for a bit of a segue?
Sure.
Those are fun to write on, by the way.
Wazz actually found this article about a Black Lives Matter protest at the Trump rally. And what was so interesting from my perspective was like, okay, cool. It seemed to have ended well. It shows that the Trump supporters actually were willing to listen, willing to let them talk, willing to give them a platform and not to be hateful. And then they turned around and said, all lives matter. And suddenly they've been excommunicated from the Black Lives Matter movement. And now it's all conspiracy theories. They aren't actually Black Lives Matter members. What were your guys' thoughts on that?
I didn't. They got ejected for Ron Think. That's what I think of that.
Here's the thing, though. It's not. Well, it is important in one end in terms of what it says about the official Black Lives Matter, but I feel like just the main takeaway from that whole event is the reactions from the attendants of the Trump rally, that they were willing to listen and cheer things that they thought were good. And, just hear the speakers out when they were given the mic. And I think that's more of an important takeaway than whether or not the group was fake or not.
Well, it might touch on there's a saying that when it comes to political discourse, the right always wants to sit down and talk, and the left always wants to do anything but. Yeah. And that's where it's like when we talk about freedom of speech, it's not nearly as reciprocated, because it's like if we actually have to talk, it means we have to engage somebody, and then we can be picked apart because we're not willing to defend our things with potentially statistics, but we're not willing to try and address that the other side might have good points.
They're not willing to be held accountable for their bullshit, basically.
You can't reason somebody out of a position they didn't reason themselves into. And the left is 100% emotion. So that's what it boils down to. It's reason versus emotion, and it's a lot easier to sway people with emotion, especially, as much as I hate to say it, it's like...
No, it's true, though. It really is easy to tug at heartstrings and intellectual.
Phil. I'm gonna say something controversial here, and it's like, as much as I hate to say it, it's the reason men are better than women at voting is because women.
Wait! Just one question. How can you be better at voting?
Because men use logic much more readily.
Guys,
we're
not swayed by emotion as much.
No, I'm not trying to. Let's say I'm not trying to argue. I just love the wording. Better at voting.
It's better as in it's better for the long term.
I gotta say, Phil. I think you're consuming too much Dennis Prager at this point.
Phil, maybe
that was his old argument. The left versus the right. Does it do good versus does it feel good?
Now, Manhattan, you wanted to say something?
I completely agree with that, too.
I had to say this, because just listen very closely. Do you hear that on the horizon? That's the sound of Sarkeesian fucking creaming her jeans because somebody just said something like Phil did.
No. Anita
Oh,
Sarkeesian is creaming her jeans because she's thinking about Sargon.
Yes. To me, my garbage human.
One of the things I wanted to add to the fact that the left is based on emotion, like Steven Crowder says, there's also no middle ground, nothing to compromise on. And I wanted to bring up was Nancy Pelosi was making a speech about the DREAM Act, and because there's some talk between Trump and the Democrats, people who are, at least from what I can tell, they are the dreamers. They're there shouting her down and taking over her speech because they want a clean DREAM Act without any kind of compromise or anything like that, no border security.
The most infuriating thing about that to me is the...
And you know what Nancy Pelosi said? She said that we hear you. She's like, where's the thing? Like in the middle of being shouted down, she's like, you've had your say, and it's beautiful music to our ears, and she just keeps getting shouted down. Like,
it's
hilarious.
That's what you.
is they aren't even American citizens. They have no right talking to the elected representative because they're not even allowed to vote. But somehow that's okay.
It's infuriating and hilarious, but it's more scary than funny because it's actually like
there's actually a town in what was it, New Hampshire, I think, it's a city. Or it might have been Illinois. I can't remember the state. But it's a city.
That's far apart from each other.
Well, yeah, but they're pretty similar in values.
Okay, yeah.
It's a city trying to pass for their local elections. They're trying to have non-citizens be able to vote.
No.
And it's like wait. Totally backfire in what they're trying to do because it's like, well, all of us conservatives from other states could come in there and vote for conservative stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. Does that only mean that? Is there any?
It would be you just don't necessarily have to be a resident of the city or prove citizenship of the state or country.
So you can just vote if you're just driving by.
Exactly.
On a road trip.
Minding
you could be like, oh, there's elections here. Oh, cool. I'm gonna vote.
That's my new hobby. I like to go to all new towns and vote in different places that I don't live.
It's like, has anybody ever done an online poll and seen it not be trashed by trolls? Because that's exactly what would happen with these real life elections.
Yeah, I'll vote for the dog mayor.
Well, exactly. They have like freaking Mr. Splashy Pants would be the new mayor.
No. I want Donald Trump to be president and mayor of that city at the same time.
Oh my God.
Well,
supreme leader.
Yeah.
Always that those elements of society are fighting against things which were established to actually help their best interests. The reason why we have laws that say you can only vote if you've lived in a region for X amount of time and are a citizen is to prevent people from gerrymandering in a direct sense. Like, we're going to send everybody to vote in your particular thing. So therefore, whoever is in your region, their vote doesn't count. It's like here in Canada, we keep on having a serious fight over the idea of a single transferable vote, whereby which you'd be able to take extra votes in a riding you lost in and move them to another riding. So suddenly, Vancouver's votes are now counting in what's going on in Winnipeg. And it's like, why on earth would you do that? Because you've suddenly taken the regional representation out of the electoral process. And that's horrifying.
And you need to have something concrete to demonstrate you have a vested interest in the place that the election is being held for.
Yeah, I mean, there has been some talk like this in the German state of North Rhine-Westphalia before the last state election there, which happened earlier this year. The last government of that state, on their way out, tried to change the electoral system so that non-citizens could vote if they live in that state for, I think, three years at least or something. So not by citizenship but by residence. They tried and they failed. They mostly failed because it's against not only the state constitution but also the federal constitution. That was funny. But it's just so, and always comes from the left. I've never seen someone on the right being like, you know what would be a good idea? Having non-citizens vote. No, because it's fucking stupid.
Well, the thing though is, if we go towards, let's say, the extreme authoritarian right, they've already figured out that you don't need to do that. You just need to have a corporation which exists and is powerful enough to work around the system which is in place. Hence, you can have a company shut down an entire country and not actually have to deal with voters in any way, shape, or form. The trick for the left is they don't necessarily want to acknowledge corporatism and corporate power, and they want to maintain the illusion that they're speaking on behalf of the people, whoever those people are. They don't like to clarify. Ergo, it's like, let's get mob rule wherever we can. And it's like, why? Because Marx said you should. And it's like, that's not a good reason.
Well, it's religion in and of itself. That's why Marx was vehemently atheist. It's like because you need the government to take the place of God. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Because, like you said, religion is the opiate of the masses. It's because religion makes people happy with less than perfection.
Someone in the comments, Constantine the Mediocre, says, in Vermont, you can vote in local and state elections if you own property there.
Well, that's kind of, that's actually like a couple of the, there's actually, this is kind of a thing, a lot of the state, okay, so House of Representatives members is probably the easiest way to say it. For particular states, they just own a bunch of land in those states, but they aren't necessarily full-time residents, which is troubling to me, at least.
Provided ownership doesn't get tacked on to percentages, that's reasonable. It's reasonable to say that I should be able to have a say in something which I have an ownership in, but as soon as it turns to percentage base, that becomes scary. So imagine if I own X many acres, I get 30 votes. If I own double that, 60. That's what you want to make sure you're staying away from. But it's the vested interest thing. If you own property, you have a vested interest. If you have citizenship, you have a vested interest. Removing the vested part is dangerous.
That makes sense.
One question there. Is Bernie Sanders still living in Vermont? Because I'm pretty sure he does have property in Vermont, so he could just move and have influence elsewhere.
I think it was revealed that he has 3 multi-million-dollar homes, if I remember right, in various places.
That's how socialism gets more votes.
3 homes is a human right.
It's true. You know what's interesting is, this is a tangent, but so every Friday, the Wall Street Journal has a mansion section. It's always interesting to peruse through it. One time, its feature article was about the there's a certain breed of people that actually collect homes. It's
like called politicians?
Well, no, not necessarily. Like Ben Stein is one, for example. He was one of their featured people, and it's like it's a collector like anyone else is, collects whatever. It's just they happen to collect very expensive and very large things that they're houses.
Oh yeah,
I thought that was very interesting to read about.
Fascinating. Well, it's like you have architectural enthusiasts who'll do the same thing, and it's weird because they're not actually buying it to do anything with it. They just want to say, I have an example of X or Y type of architecture. But the amount of cash on hand you'd have to do that is ridiculous.
I mean, it's like a collector of anything else, really. It's like, say you're a car collector. It's like, I never drive any of these, but I have them. I've got a Ferrari 250 GTO.
I knew it.
It's like, I never do anything with it. Even though
Jay Leno. Although I think Jay Leno drives them as well. So
I like collectors like, what's his name? And it's the guy that got fired off of New Top Gear. Chris Evans in the UK. I like collectors like him.
He got fired?
Off the show, yeah, because people hated him because he's a douche or whatever.
I mean, he is, but I didn't know that. But that's funny.
There's kind of a theory that he was. They always intended for him to be fired because they knew the new show would never live up to the old one. So they kind of put him in as a fall guy, essentially.
Nice.
But anyway,
I mean, they are Brits, so they're capable of that.
But I digress. But I like collectors like him, where he has a bunch of Ferraris. He's got like 10, super multi-million-dollar Ferraris. But what he does is he lets people drive them for charity donations. And it's like, and when he's interviewed about it, it's like, how do you let people drive your $10 million Ferrari? It's like, well, it's like, because it's a car, it's meant to be driven. That's what he says. It's like, so since I've got the wealth to buy it, why don't I make the best of it and make sure the money people are paying me goes to a good cause?
That's not what a douchebag does.
Well, I know. Like, I think he's super awesome in that respect. And so it's interesting to see how he's like a douchebag and his persona apparently is a douchebag, but personally he's a really good guy, I guess.
Maybe he doesn't come across as likable. Maybe that's all.
Well, I think people really didn't like him in New Top Gear just because of his particular behavior, like bragging about the ratings and stuff.
Maybe just because his name was not Jeremy Clarkson.
I don't know. You got me. All I know is
it's tough to strike. It's tough for lightning to strike twice, though. Like the three guys on the original Top Gear, actually second iteration, because the original Top Gear did have Jeremy, but there were a couple other guys too. They just had really great chemistry. But I think it also speaks to the fact that when it comes to people's personalities, you can't really call a spade because you never know what they're like outside of where you see them. And I think that talks about YouTube celebrity in general, or just, people who are like recluses but donate tons of money to a particular hospital. But I guess that's for another podcast, eh?
I suppose it is 7:30. We've been on for an hour, Mark. It's time to shut her down.
Yeah, I hope we have more stories next week than this week. But yeah. All right. If anyone's watching, if you think we could do anything better, give us any suggestions, and tune in next week. Thanks for watching us.
Adios.
Have a good night, everyone.